Hi, hello, vanakkam, and welcome back to yet another episode on Little's Law YouTube channel. So today in this video, we are going to discuss about one of the very most important question which you will definitely get in your performance testing or performance engineering interview. So please do watch the video till the end to make sure you crack your interview. So this is again, I'm saying this is one of the most important question that is asked in the performance testing interviews to know how well you understand or how well you have the basics of how well you know the basics of performance testing. So please do understand. If you really do not understand, please do go through the video again and have an understanding before you go to the interview. So before we move on to the video, I wish you all the very best for your interview, and let's now watch the video. So in this video, in the thumbnail you would have seen, so this is what we're going to discuss is the percentile. So in this summary report here, you can see the samples, the average, the minimum response times, the maximum response times. But when it comes to the aggregate graph, here you can see apart from the average, minimum and maximum, we can see the 90th, 95th and the 99th. So the question to you in the interview will be what is, so some of the times the question might be what is the percentile. So what is the percentile in performance testing, or they may even ask you what is 90th, 95th or 99th percentile in performance testing. So let's now see. First, I'll try to explain you in a very simple way. I'll just break it so in a very simple way so that you can easily understand what exactly is the percentile, and even you can use this example in your interview. And this will definitely help you because most of the people will crack the interviews if they use the examples. So now let me first explain you before taking you through the performance testing example. I'll just take you through a very basic example which we all know in our day-to-day life. So imagine you are in a restaurant and you're waiting for your food to arrive. So the restaurant staff measures how long it takes for each customer's food to be served, and they collect this data for all the customers throughout the day, and this is to improve their performance. Yeah, you're right. So this is to improve their performance and to improve the better feedback from the customers. So what they do is they measure how long it takes for each customer's food to be served. Yes, so this is something what we normally talk about the response time. So let's come back to the example. So now let's say we are someone who goes to the restaurant and we are interested in knowing how quickly most people get their food. And say for example, I'm going to the restaurant and I ask the restaurant staff for the 90th percentile. Yes, I'm asking for the 90th percentile here. So the 90th percentile here represents the time it takes for 90% of customers to receive their food. In other words, only 10% of the customers wait longer than the 90th percentile time. Now, when it comes to the 95th percentile, so this again represents the time it takes for the 95% of the customers to get their food. And this means that only 5% of customers have to wait longer than the 95th percentile time. And finally, if we ask about, so finally I'm asking for the 99th percentile. So that represents the time it takes for the 99% of customers to be served their food. And so only 1% of the customers have to wait longer than the 90th percentile time. So now you have almost understood how does this 90th, 95th and 99th percentile. So it is overall, so it is the number of percentage, I mean the amount of percentage of the customers they receive their food. So the time it takes for the percentage of customers to receive their food. Now, this percentile helps us understand how quickly most people are getting their food and how long the outliers or a small percentage of customers have to wait. By focusing on higher percentiles like the 95th or the 99th, we pay attention to the experience of the customers who may have to wait longer are ensuring that the majority of customers have a satisfactory experience. So in performance testing, the same concept applies, but instead of food delivery, we measure the response time of the pages of the computer systems or the applications. The percentiles help us understand how quickly most users experience responses from the system, which also considering the experiences of the smaller percentage of users who may face longer response time. So now let's go back to the performance testing context. So when it comes to performance testing context, we measure the response time of the application or a page, the response time of a page or a transaction. And these response times can vary depending on factors like the complexity of the system, the number of users, and the load on the system. So three factors. One is the complexity of the system, the second is the number of users, and the third is the load on the system. So it depends on the, I'm really sorry about my handwriting. So it depends on the complexity. So yes, coming back to the percentile in performance testing. So their response times depends on the complexity and then the number of users and then the load on the system. So these are the three factors the response times depends. So now let's say we are testing a website and we want to understand how quickly most users receive a response from the system. So we collect the response data for multiple users performing various actions on the website, such as loading a page, submitting a form, searching, adding to cart, logging out, login. So all these transactions. So the percentiles help us analyze this data and understand the distribution of response time. So for example, the 90th percentile. So let's go to the 90th percentile, for example. So we are interested, or the interviewer asks you, why do we need to collect the 90th percentile? So which means the reason we want to collect the 90th percentile is we want to know the response time that 90% of the users experience or 90% of users get. In other words, only 10% of the users have to wait longer than the 90th percentile time. So just remember, so 90th percentile means it tells the response times that 90% of the users experience, and the remaining 10% will have to wait longer than the 90th or 90% of the people. So this you have to clearly explain with the example. And then when it comes to the 95th percentile, so if we want to collect the 95th percentile, so what or why do we need to collect the 95th percentile? So it takes time. So the response times, or it represents the time it takes for 95% of users. So the response time taken by 90%, 95% of users to receive a response. So this is the 95th percentile. So only 5% of users have to wait longer than the 95% of people. So again, this is the same case with the 99th percentile, where 99% of users takes this response time, or I would say the 99th percentile response time is the time 99th percentile response time is the time it takes for 99% of users to get the response. This means that only the remaining 1% have to wait longer than the 99th percentile response time. So by looking at these different percentiles, we can understand how quickly most users are receiving responses from the system and how long the outliers of a small percentage of users have to wait. So focusing on higher percentages, percentiles like the 95th or 99th, this allows us to pay attention to the experiences of users who may face longer response times, ensuring that the majority of the users have a satisfactory experience. In summary, percentiles in performance testing help us analyze the response time and understand the distribution of performance. And in fact, this percentile allows us to identify the potential bottlenecks, optimize the system for better user experiences, and ensure that performance targets such as the SLA are met. So basically, every performance tester will start to collect the average response time, and only the performance engineers or the testers who have a huge experience or knowledge will definitely even look for the percentile. So let's now see what is an average response time and the percentile, and why do we need to collect the percentile and more than the average response time. So first let's see what is the average response time. So the average response time is a common metric that calculates the average or mean value of all the response times collected during performance testing. It is calculated by summing up all the response times and dividing by the total number of measurements. So the average response time provides an overall view of the system's performance, representing the central tendency of the data. But on the other hand, as we have already see about the percentiles, so the percentiles on the other hand provide a measure of the response time distribution and indicate the percentage of response times that fall below a certain value. These percentiles are calculated by sorting all the response times in ascending order and identifying the time value below which a certain percentage of response times fall. So the key difference, what's the difference between the average response time and the percentile? So the key difference, why do we need to use percentiles? So first thing is the user experience. So let me go back here. So the first thing here is the user experience. So the percentiles give insights into the response times experienced by different segment of users, and they help identify the performance experienced by the majority of the users. For example, the 90th or the 95th or the 99th, as well as the performance outliers or worst case scenarios. So when it comes to the second point, the SLA, the service level agreement, they often define performance targets based on specific percentiles, and meeting these targets ensures that the system performs satisfactorily for the specified percentage of users. And when it comes to the third point, which is the performance optimization, so this helps. So the percentile actually helps identify the performance bottlenecks and areas that require optimization. And by focusing on higher percentiles, we can address issues affecting a smaller but potentially critical subset of users. And then the final difference or the final requirement of collecting the percentile is the realistic performance analysis. So average response times may be skewed by outliers or occasional spikes, providing a less accurate representation of typical user experience. But on the other hand, the percentiles offer a more realistic view of system performance by considering the range of response times. So, what makes the difference? Why the average response time is different from the percentile? So, the first thing is the calculation method. So, the way they are getting calculated. So, the average response time is calculated by summing up all the response times and dividing by the total number of measurements, and it provides the mean value of the response times. But on the other hand, the percentiles are calculated by sorting all the response time in ascending order and identifying the time value below which a certain percentage of response times fall. Percentiles represent specific points in the response time distribution. And when it comes to the second way, so which is the representation of data. So when it comes to the representation of data, the average response time represents the central tendency of the data, and it gives an overall view of the system's performance without considering the distribution or outliers. But on the other hand, the percentiles provide insights into the distribution of response times, and they indicate the percentage of response times that fall below a specific value, allowing a more granular understanding of different segment of users. And then when it comes to the third difference, which is the focus on user experience. So when it comes to the focus, the average response time does not specifically address the experiences of different segment of users. And in fact, it provides a general overview but may not accurately represent the experience of most users. But when it comes to the percentiles, they focus on different segment of users. For example, the 90th percentile represents the response time experienced by 90% of users, and the 99th percentile represents the response time experienced by 99% of users. So the percentiles help identify the performance experienced by the majority of users as well as the outliers or worst case scenarios. And then when it comes to the SLA compliance, the average response time may not align with specific SLA targets since it represents an average across all response times and does not consider specific thresholds. But when it comes to percentiles, SLAs often define performance targets based on specific percentiles, and percentiles such as the 90th or 95th percentile provide more relevant measure to ensure compliance with SLA requirements for a specific percentage of users. So these are some of the ways that differs that brings the difference between the average response time and the percentile. So before I end, let me give you another interesting example of how to differ the average response time and the percentile. So imagine you are waiting in a line at a popular ice cream shop. So the shop wants to measure the time it takes for customers to receive their ice cream cones. So they collect the data for all the customers throughout the day. Again, this is something like our previous example, but here I will take you through the average response time and the percentile. So how do we calculate the average response time in this scenario is like calculating the average time it takes for all the customers in the line to get their ice cream cones, and it gives you a general idea of how long people wait on average. For example, if the average response time is 5 minutes, it means that on average people wait for around 5 minutes to receive their ice cream cones. Now let's consider the percentile to understand the different segment of customers experiences. So the 90th percentile in this scenario represents the time that 90% of customers spend waiting in line to receive their ice cream cones. So if the 90th percentile response time is 7 minutes, it means the 90% of customers receive their ice cream cones within 7 minutes or less, while the 10% of customers may have to wait longer. And then when it comes to the 99th percentile, the 99th percentile represents the time that 99% of customers spend waiting in line. If the 99th percentile response time is 10 minutes, it means that 99% of customers receive their ice cream cones within 10 minutes or less, while only 1% of the customer may have to wait longer. So in this scenario, the average response time provides an overall view of how long customers wait on average. However, percentiles give you insights into specific segment of customers experience. So by looking at the percentiles like 90th and 99th, we can understand how many customers have shorter wait times and ensure that the majority of customers have a satisfactory experience, even if there are a few outliers who may experience longer wait times. So while the average response times gives us a general idea, percentiles helps us understand different segment of customers experiences and address the need of the majority. So with that, we come to an end, and I believe the video will be very, very, very useful to you. So please do watch the video or hear the video multiple times before you go for the interview, and all the very best for your interview. Until I meet you in another really, really interesting video, it's bye bye from Vasan Shanmugam and Little's Law.